and I closed literally the day before the last payroll exits my bank account. Do not start a company on a whim. Please don't, because like it is a heavy load. All right? It's not all sunshine and rainbows. That you better be passionate about it. You better love it. That you better be serious, because like you get that thing going, and like especially once it gets going, if you're not careful, it's a prison. Like, let's just say it like it is. Lots of bears, black bears, and they're chill. Like a moose, bears. My wife ran into a mountain lion, and that's not chill, but it didn't eat her. Whew,
Oh, hello. What's going on?
How we doing, big guy?
Good. How you doing? Is the real question. Have you been through the ringer?
I have been through the ringer, but I got out of the ringer 6 weeks ago. And so I'm Gucci, man. I'm like light
Nice.
as a feather, like plenty of cash in the bank now. Like basically with this last round closing, we kind of got to that checkpoint of like, there's not really any reasonable path to go to zero anymore unless we get really aggressive and chase, which we won't do because that's just
Yep.
not our vibe. Is like as long as I like make tactical bets, gauge it, and pull them back if they're not working, like we'll ride this thing to profitability with that last round. And so it's like, and this is the first time I've ever been there as a founder where it's always been like, okay, yeah, I got money, but like at some point it's going to run out, and at some point I'm going to have to need more. It's like I'm finally at that point where I'm like, okay, like I can take this money and see it through to profitability, and like that's kind of a reasonable baseline now, and it's like good to great, and it's like that whole like existential risk coming off the shoulders is I've realized in the last 6 weeks is like a big deal, and I'm like light as a feather, like
So so you're saying you're sleeping okay?
I'm sleeping all right, dude. I'm getting a straight 8 hours. Just I'm and I'm and more even more than the sleep is like I'm waking up like all right, rather than waking up like okay,
All right.
like
Yeah.
So
Nice.
yeah, dude. So yeah. No, so it's
Amazing.
good. It's
That's
good.
so
It's good.
cool.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
thanks for the time, and
Dude, I'm
and
glad
I'm
we made it
excited
here,
to.
man. It feels like it's been months that we've been like, all right, let's do it. I gotta kick it out. I gotta kick it out.
Yeah, no,
I'm
no.
stoked to be
All the
here.
things.
Yes.
I'm glad to. Well, and today is an interesting day. So you are hitting us on Stackless birthday. This is the 2 year from when we incorporated, as of
Whoa, the
today.
terrible twos.
Um, exactly. Yeah, terrible twos. And on top of that, it was a 2 year chase to chase down the .com, but I just got it and we just launched it. So
Dude, let's go. I
yeah,
just bought
yeah.
Forecastr.com last week, but we have not launched it. But dude, that's so exciting. Let's go. That's sick.
Yeah. That's amazing. Cool. Well, so I'm excited to chat with you. What I really want to do is like we'll dive into some of the early forecaster stories and stuff like that. But before that, sort of coming back to I love your from what I've done and seen in your history and sort of where you came from. What I'd love to hear about is when I think about the entrepreneurial journey and startup and sort of, what it takes special breed of
Yes.
person, either like the way you were raised in your family, or whether it's something that was sort of built into you to always, either explore or take risk or whatever it is. Like everybody's got sort of a different like recipe for
Totally.
what got them here. Like if you had to sort of start back prior to, say, school and or family or anything, like is there anything in that mix that you feel like sort of teed you up for where you're at now?
Yeah, man, that's an awesome question, and I think there's a number of things that come to mind for me. I mean, one is more nature, I guess, and that like I've just I've always had a very rich, what I would call curiosity. Like from a very young age, like I was the kid less so my brothers. Like I'm the middle of three brothers, right? Like both my brothers they're artists, they're super creative and that kind of stuff, but they were less like intellectually curious and creative, and so I mean I was like this guy was always like, well, why? Well, why? Well, why? Like when I was 5 years old, not to get too deep, but I was obsessed with like, what happens when you die? Like, and I would ask my mom, I would wake up in the middle of the night and I'd go to my mom and say, why, what happens when you die? She's like, well, you go to heaven. I'm like, what's that like? And she's like, well, it's this and that. I'm like, well, that doesn't make
Oh,
sense.
something's wrong with Steven.
And I was, like,
He's got to talk to somebody.
it was going, so I've always been this like I want to get down to the root of things. I want to understand the nature of things. And so I think this curiosity leads to problem identification, the desire to solve problems. I think that ultimately would lead to entrepreneurship. It's just like this kind of critical thinking that leads to like an outside the box type of approach. So there was this curiosity that's always there on the more nature side. But then on the nurture side, my father was an entrepreneur and his father was an entrepreneur. So my grandfather ran Plappert Insurance for many, many years. That was his thing, like he ran an insurance company. My father was a sales director at a company that did really well and had an early acquisition. He made a nest egg, and then when he was about my age, he launched his own payments company. He's ran it for 40 years now successfully. And so I think,
Nice.
I had these kind of role models, and I was always curious to ask my dad about business and things like that. And so I think that was also one of those things that like always kind of got the engine turning. So I think exposure to them, as entrepreneurs and kind of role models, and then just that deep curiosity, I think were two things that definitely, yeah, led to me kind of taking this path.
That's so cool. And I think about like one of the things, the first thing you said about like the being inquisitive. Um, I think that that's something that is baked in. When it's baked in, it's one of the strongest powers. That it's the difference between, and I think you can learn it though. It's one of those that like my wife and I was sort of worked on that where like she in the sort of WordPress era, we started sort of working on websites, together, and she had never really dug into that, but then all like unlocked this idea that you can ask Google and YouTube anything and that you can really sort of start to like gather. And I think that, just understanding that, but when you're born with it and you're asking everything, is that's amazing. Such a strong skill to have as an entrepreneur. And I love that being in and around it, obviously, then you had the idea that you can sort of break from, the normal traditional,
Yes.
you got to do this and you got to do that and you got to do this and you got to do that
And
kind
I
of
I think
path.
and I think maybe the third thing for me, was always this like, and again, I think at a certain level, people are kind of born with this, and at a certain level, maybe you can kind of view this changes too as age. But like, I've always been obsessed with essentially greatness. I want to be the best. I want to be great. It's not for legacy. It's not for prestige. It's not for reputation. It's just like for my own end. I don't know why it's there. It's just always been there. Where like I've never been okay with okay. Like okay is bad. I want to be great. And so I've always held myself to this like ridiculously high standard. And so in that sense, like I want to do great things just because I think they're great. And so that's just always been a big piece of me as well. And I think that also drives me towards entrepreneurship, but you have this greater opportunity to be great and to do great things or to make a big impact, because you're bringing something into existence and you're creating. And so I think that like innate desire to just be great for no reason other than just it's great. And that is the way I think about it. It's just like that's kind of been a part of me. And I think it also drives me in this way.
Well, and that's those 3 together. Now I sort of naturally see why, in your history, like coming out of school and just founding something and starting a company was like, get me to it. Let's do it.
Yes,
Um,
yes, yes. There's also the thrill
that's
seeker element, like where like I've been a big adventure guy, a big thrills guy.
yeah.
I'm the kind of guy that goes snowboarding and just sends it. Like he just goes flying and maybe he'll eat it, but he doesn't care because he's just sending it. And that's just always been so. And so I think that element too of like that really high risk tolerance, that desire for volatility. I don't want a bunch of sevens. I want tens and ones. It's like that's
Nice.
how I
Yeah.
like it. I like the volatility. It's the spice of life, and so I think that also kind of feeds into that. But my parents aren't like that. Both my parents, neither one of my parents are very risk tolerant. Neither one of them are thrill seekers. They're both like more steady eddies. So I
Yep.
didn't get it from them. But it's just like always been there or whatever. So
Y- That's cool. Well, and interesting too. Like I think there are parts of me that my dad and I sort of realized that he he broke away after medical school and realized that he didn't like the sort of how, there were parts of the hospital he worked for that it was very much like, oh, here's the medicines that we should start sort of pushing, like that when he was coming up through. And so he went and basically took out a big loan, bought a building, and ran a medical practice for 43 years. And so that sort of entrepreneurial was there. But interesting, I think, I wonder if it is also generational that I remember telling him, I'm like, okay, so what if you basically set up and you franchised and then you taught people how to do, and I'm like thinking about his like medical expansion and he's like, no, 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 I'm good. Like this was, you know what I mean? Like this was good. And this is sort of set. But I was always sort of, bugging him to like, oh, we could make and you could have different
To go
cities and different
further.
areas. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Um, that's cool. Well, so like after school, I saw you started your first company. Like you didn't did you work anywhere else like sort of prior to that?
No, I like so I studied math in school, so I've always been good with the numbers. I've always been like interested in like kind of money and math, like math and economics. They've always been my jam, and so I studied math in school. And then I had my best buddy since third grade, Andrew Busa. He approached me as we were graduating, in May of 2013, with the idea for a company that we would eventually start called FantasyHub. And it was in the early days of daily fantasy sports when like DraftKings and FanDuel were kind of pioneering this ability to wager real money on fantasy sports because sports betting wasn't legal, And so there was this kind of workaround to bet real money on fantasy sports. And it's kind of a new concept. Andrew and I both played fantasy sports, and we thought there was an opportunity to just like build a company there. And it started out very much like we have no clue what we're doing. We know that let's just give it a go. And if it fails in like 3 to 6 months, like cool, we tried it, awesome. Like we'll go get big boy jobs. That was our mentality around it. And to the credit of our parents, right? Charlie, his dad, and my dad, Jim, they came together. They said, guys, if you wanted to pursue an MBA, we would put this money towards it. So like, here's 25K a piece. They gave us 50K in their initial cap. They said, go get an MBA, meaning like start the company, right? Go get the real MBA, which is like building and experiential learning. And it was an amazing move by them that we almost squandered completely because because we spent that 50K with like a dev shop to build a prototype. They were garbage. They built the worst prototype ever. Looking back on it now, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe what they did. And they were just taking advantage of us. We burned through that 50K. We were almost dead in the water right there. And then here comes this angel investor, Kevin Johnson out of Nashville, loves playing DFS, got connected to him through one of my friends. Like he loves it. He gives us another 50K. We spent that one a lot better because of the learnings. We actually got a product to market, and off we go for the next 3 years. And so it's like we almost we almost just like totally face planted, but just it's just like survive until you thrive. And that one never did fully thrive. We did fail 3 years in, but 3 years was enough to get an MBA and to really
Yeah.
learn the art that they're the initial arts, right? I'm not gonna say I'm a black belt after 3 years, but the initial art of building a business and would ultimately lead to, the rest of my career so far, and so yeah.
That's amazing. And I love that so much because look, I'm not anti schooling, I'm not anti college or MBA, but I've talked to, I have family members that I've talked to that are like, I don't know, I think I'll just keep pushing on business for the next couple of years, but it's always used in this sort of umbrella term, right? It's like, well, I'm going to go study some business. And it's so different. Even from an MBA perspective, you would have gotten the theory of how people do things in business versus burning through your 50K, learning incredibly like important, valuable lessons. And then also that like networking and like the 50K, the responsibility for it, how to grow it, how to get the 3 years, which is in my mind just far exceeds even getting, an MBA that says this is how you do it once you start applying it in the future.
I
Um,
think that's totally right. I think there's thinking and there's doing. There's conceptual learning, there's experiential learning, and both have merit. But experiential learning, I think, is ultimately more powerful. And so I think if you lean towards doing and experiential learning, like in doing, you kind of must think, and you think and do, and you learn on the fly. And I do think the power of it is absolute, which like isn't to say that there isn't power in the academic setting and in that kind of conceptual learning, because there is up into a point, but it only gets you up into a point. And so I do think it's like the kind of like, as you go through your learning, kind of phases, you go really high conceptual early on, and then you should start to kind of go conceptual and experiential, and then you go pretty much all experiential. And so that's what I think there's kind of a phase shift to it in a sense. But yeah.
Yeah. Where did that lead to? So that had how did that end? Was that like did you just decide one day it was like, all right, it's time to shut the doors?
We did, and after waking up probably like the 45 days prior at the same breakfast table being like, "Is today the day we shut it down?" Because that was one of the things that like, when you're shutting down a business, if you've never done it before, it's like one of those things where like there isn't like an obvious day where you wake up and it's like, "Well, today is the day, kill it." It's like it's this slow death where it's like every day you get more and more like it's like the writing becomes stronger on the wall, and like and you get kind of more and more insolvent, right? You get more and more like, "Oh, sure." And it's like, but then essentially but like everything in every fiber of your being is telling you to like push through the wall, find a way through it, keep working on it. And so it's like it's a weird space, but everything that played after that is like, I mean, once we got that money from Kevin, like I said, we used it to get a better product into the market. We used that to actually get some nice initial traction. And then we were the first Kentucky-based company to ever get selected into a Techstars program, which is really cool for me as a native
Nice.
Kentuckian. And there's been plenty since, and it's great to crack that seal. And in 2015, we moved the company down to Austin, Texas, to go through Techstars. And that was a huge unlock for me, just like going through Techstars, meeting all these mentors, meeting all these successful founders, like soaking it up like a sponge, just like 23 years old. And it was just like the veil had been lifted, man. I felt like I didn't know everything, but I went from like unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence. Right? All of a sudden, I knew all the things I didn't know, and I was able to pluck at them and learn them in a way that before I was like it was totally opaque. And so that was just an enormous, time in my life, super, super fun. But then a year later, we did ultimately fail. Like we had some good traction, but it was nothing that was going to like, knock everybody's socks off. And at this time in the market, there was like a lot of legal turbulence, a lot of cease and desist letters from AGs, a lot of like, is this thing even going to be around? Is it going to regulate it? Like, what's going to happen? And so the investment landscape totally dried up, rightfully so. Like, I was like, nobody should have touched this business, and nobody did. And I mean, we had like a couple hundred K in commitments, but it wasn't going to be enough. So we didn't take them, which was a great call. We shut it down, which was a great call. We frankly shut it down too late, which was a bad call, just because like, we didn't want to shut it down. We were young. We are like, let's push, let's push, let's push. By the time we shut it down, it was more messy than it had to be if we would have shut it down earlier. So it was a whole
Right.
learning experience, like how to wind down a company, like, because there's a there, and nobody teaches you how to do it because everybody wants to talk about the winning, not the losing, and it's burly. Like, I mean, you shut that thing down, and it's like, man, that was 3 years of my life, and I poured everything into that thing. Fantasy Hub was a deep, deep integrated part of me that was now dead and just decaying off my body. And it's like, and it felt like a piece of me had died. And it felt like it was an intense experience for me too, because like I did grow up in a household that like my dad, like we were well off, like, like we were well off. We never needed for anything big time, It's like, and I was always like pretty smart and pretty athletic and like never the most popular guy, but I had plenty of friends. And so I always just kind of breezed through life. And like fantasy was the first time I was like, I applied myself in full to something that I failed at. And it was an important moment for me to like to reflect on that and to build off that adversity and to strengthen my resolve. And so like that, the months that came to pass that failure were really heavy. It was kind of the only time in my life where I ever dealt with any kind of like really true, like kind of extended state of depression, and then, but then I emerged with it, from it like a phoenix. I felt like it was just like, it was so like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And then so I'm so grateful for that experience and what it was, and I always like, and I always never liked the idea that you take somebody's money and you lose it and all that kind of thing, but it's just part of the game. And so yeah, that's kind of how it all shook out.
I love hearing, obviously the shutdown story, and you had a difficult period afterwards, and I think that is so hard because you not only give every fiber trying to figure out how to like keep this going, and you wake up and but you live it and you breathe it, and you've also wrapped your ego and yourself in this cloak of the brand that you basically are trying to birth into existence. And then to not have that work is it's so much more core and essential to yourself than it is if you were just to work somewhere and they said you're not doing great, we're going to fire you. You know, it is so much more different than basically swimming upstream for 3 years and then having someone be like, I don't think so.
Totally.
So
Especially the
but
first one.
I love the fact that also, and I can't wait to where we get to where you're at now. I think for other people to hear that, like, and we actually had another uh, Andrew Booz, who I talked to an episode or two ago, had a very similar situation and basically went in the hole, you know, two or $300,000, and then did it, but sold it, and after selling it immediately had that same sort of like, you know, what do I do? Who am I? What am I doing? You know, and I think that, you know, entrepreneurship being so closely tied to the fiber of who you are and what you can do is it's nice to see and hear the stories after that, that like that's not just it. That's not the end of the story. Like this is where we go on to the subsequent chapters.
100%, and I'll also just say, I think it also needn't be so as well that you do wrap your identity in your company. It's easy to do it. If you let it happen, it will do it. If the business wants to consume your identity, and if you don't push back against that, it will consume your identity. It did mine with Fantasy Hub. But then you fail one and it hurts and you rip it off. And like me and Forecastr, it's a totally different relationship. Forecaster's awesome. And I work super hard to make Forecastr awesome and a great company. And like, I would be very sad if Forecastr didn't work out. But the big difference is like, Forecastr is a company. That's all it is. It is a company. Quite frankly, it doesn't matter at the end. It doesn't. Like, what matters is like my health and my family and the love that I share with those that are closest to me. That is ultimately what matters. That is what is you. And this other thing is just this thing that you're doing. And it's a very clean line that I draw these days where Forecaster is going places. It's going so much better than the first one. But if it did die, it would be totally different for me. Would it hurt? Yes. Would I be sad? Yes. Would I be really disappointed that I didn't create, a success for my investors and for my employees and stuff like that? Of course I would. But I really don't think I would go through the identity crisis that I did the first time because I've evolved in my thinking around it, and there's more of a separation there between Stephen Plappert and the CEO
Yeah.
of Forecastr and Forecastr itself. You know.
Yep. Well, and also the age differences, I imagine, between and the experience that you've had, because when you
Yes.
first do it coming out of college, I think most anybody coming out of college is coming into this world and into this society going like, all right, how do I make my mark? How do I make it like people to know about me? Like I'm gonna make something. And that's so much more sort of close to the bone than it is after you've had a ton of experiences and you go, this is a thing, it's separate from me. Like it's a thing I'm doing, but it's not me.
100%, man. It's like when you interact with a kid and they just attach to stuff, everything feels so real. Like, if like you're in high school and you have a breakup and you're like, my life's over. And then
Oh,
it's like
this
you're
is it. I'll
yeah,
never find
yeah.
anyone again.
Because
Like,
it feels so real when you're that young
yeah,
and you're
yeah.
that kind of naive, really, to use a harsher term, or you just whatever. You don't have the perspective, and then you get older and you get that perspective, and you say, okay, like there's a base here, and as long as that base is good, I'm good. Everything else, you're in the bonus. It's like, so don't sweat it
Yep.
too much, or whatever. So anyway.
So what did coming out of that, like what was a bit of the slingshot from rising from as the Phoenix?
Super cool how life works. I love all these things in life. It's very cool. So for me, I'm like in that depression, I'm like, man, this is a bummer. And I'm working through all that reflecting and I'm coming out of that. And I was like, man, like biggest like kind of theme in my life, biggest joy of my life is the great outdoors. I am a wild man. I'm a naturalist. I love rolling around in the dirt. And I'd always wanted to hike the Appalachian Trail. And fantasy of failing, I was like, like this is a moment. Like I could go hike the Appalachian Trail. I don't have a job. Like I could go do that. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. And luckily, my girlfriend at the time, now wife, was like, I'm down to do that as well. And so me and Emily, decided we're going to do a through hike of the Appalachian Trail in 2017. Business failed in March 2016. It was a little late to just like to hard shift up to that experience in 2016. So we said, okay, we'll do the
Right.
2017 season. So, and that created this 1 year gap where like I had a year until March of 2017 when I would start the AT. And so I was, of course, doing physical training, but I needed to do something to make money. And I'm this math kid who loves the numbers, who loves finance, who just came out of Techstars and saw that there was 9 other founders that went through that like barf when they come to the numbers. And I was like, I could just be their numbers guy, and I did for a number of the Techstars companies and then another of other companies as well. I started just like that whole year. I was like, I'll be a fractional to finance for all these companies. I'll make some money. I'll cut them off. I'll go hike the AT. I'll figure it out from there. And in that year, I'm using eShares at the time now, Carter, but like eShares a lot for the capital management. I'm pulling in HubSpot data, QuickBooks data, and I'm pulling it all in a spreadsheet and I'm managing all this stuff out of a spreadsheet. And I'm just like, man, like if eShares exists and HubSpot exists and QuickBooks exists, like why is there not one of those things for the model? This is so backwards that this is over here. It needn't that be the case, and I was calling it crystal ball. I was like, and that was just my vibey name for it. I was like, crystal ball, you're living in the future, whatever. And so I was thinking about that. And then I went and hiked the trail and I spent 6 months in the woods, Georgia to Maine, 2,000 miles, like the adventure of
Oh
a
my gosh, that's
lifetime.
amazing.
It was incredible,
Any
man.
bears?
Oh, lots of bears, black bears, and they're chill. Like moose, bears. My
Nice.
my wife ran into a mountain lion, and that's not chill, but it didn't eat her.
No,
So,
no.
whew,
Oh my gosh.
but that's so, and all the people you meet, man, and like that experience is amazing. And like so that whole thing was incredible. And occasionally on the trail, like it's this weird inverse of our style of life. For the life me and you living, we're sitting in chairs right now. We're a perfect example of this. Body's not doing nothing, just sitting there. Brain's cranking hard all day. All the work's going on up here. On the trail, it's the inverse. Brain's chilling. It's like, don't trip over a root. It's chilling.
Yep.
Body's cranking. And so your brain has this space to wander. And so I'd just be like, that was such a cool part of that experience. And occasionally it would wander to crystal ball. I'd be like, man, that crystal ball thing. I think that's a pretty cool idea. Like maybe I'll do that when I get back. Occasionally that would come up, and then like when I did get back, I joined a CFO shop called Venture First. I met my co-founder, Logan, working there. He had a similar concept. And I was like, man, check this out. And, it's kind of one of those rest is history moments, but yeah, that was like the transition.
That's amazing. I love that. And I love that idea that you essentially kind of walked away from all of it. Haha.
Yes.
And in that way, I mean, Forecastr wouldn't have been born had you not also had the face plant, and then the sort of like impetus to go out and think about things. And I love hearing those. I had a similar thing, let's tackle this, but that thing that sticks in your brain, and like if for you that crystal ball like kept bugging you, I love the psychology behind that, that there's this thing, this idea that won't let you go and is like, excuse excuse me. Can we just go back to that thing for a second, and like, which is such an interesting genesis for something like that.
Totally. That's kind of how it's honestly it's a good filter. It's got to let it sit there for a while because one of the things I tell people all the time now, it's like, do not start a company on a whim. Please don't. Because like once you do and you get going on it, man, like it is a heavy load. All right. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. It's a heavy load. And so you better be passionate about it. You better love it. That you better be serious because like you get that thing going. And like, especially once it gets going, like, I mean, if you're not careful, it's a prison. Like, let's just say it like it is. If you're not careful, it's a prison. And so, like, I think it's good to actually like let something marinate. And if it's nagging and if it sticks around and if it has some real staying power, that's an indication that like, hey, this thing might have the foundations of something you could devote your life to. If it's fleeting, well, good, dodged a bullet there. Don't go running after it. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you guys met, and what was the sort of then the beginnings of those discussions, and then the sort of, was it an evolution of Crystal Ball into
It
Forecaster? Like,
was
what was that
cool.
period?
So it was like so there's this thing where it's like I come back from the trail, right? I get a drink with John Shoemate, who's the CEO of Venture First. I'm just buddies with John. I'm talking about the trail. He's like, what do you got to do next? I'm like, man, I'm not sure. Like, I just got back. Like, I probably need to get a job for a little bit. And then, I'm kind of mulling on some things. And he's like, well, why don't you just come work for me while you figure it out? I'm like, yeah, dude, that else would be great. Like, I'll come in as a flex role. I can build some models. I can do some biz dev. Like, and so I did. And Logan was there as the head of FP&A for Venture First, overseeing the analyst team, building all the models for the CFO services that Venture First ran. And so Logan, while I was out on the trail, had been having this idea for like, what the Carta financial models, the HubSpot of finance, like that kind of thing. And it was like, it was like 3 months into working at that job. We were back to back in these desks. So we became real chummy. We're similar age and we get along great. And he tapped me on the shoulder one day. He's like, man, I was just thinking, and he starts just going on about this idea. It's like, I was just thinking, like, why couldn't we build this thing, blah, blah, blah. And I just started like laughing at him. And he's like, what? It's like, I was like, do you hate, like, what's so funny? And I was like, just check this out. And I had made a deck for Crystal Ball back in the day just to organize my thinking. And
Yeah.
I pulled the deck up. I was like, flip through that. He starts flipping through it. He was like, what the hell? I was like, I don't know, dude. I was thinking the same thing, dude. Again, and
Synchronicity.
yeah. And it was kind of one of these moments where it's like, man, if you're thinking this and I'm thinking this, there's something to it. Like, let's take it on a turn. And now this is Logan's first business. And so much like I was at FantasyHub, like he's been at Venture First for years. He's like, this is his first idea. And he's a little bit more like, all right, like, let's quit. Let's start this thing. He's like excited about it. And like, just like you would be. And me, I think the scar tissue of my first failure said, well, hold on. Like, like we got jobs, we got salaries. Like, let's just play it cool. And let's take this thing to some checkpoints. Like, let's minimize the risk so that if we do decide to launch in, we can do it kind of like with a pretty good footing. And so we actually incubated the company at Venture First for 18 months. For 6 months, we just did a bunch of customer discovery, something I never did at FantasyHub. Just ask people like, what do you do for your model now? What do you like about it? What do you not like about
Yeah.
it? Do you have insight? Who do you share it with? Just like really nothing about Forecastr, just only questions about the model. And after 6 months, Venture First is a company that's selling Excel-based financial models. So this is a competitive product at the end of the day. And so, so we could have so we had to go to Venture First about this. And I love John. John's a friend and everything like that. So we wanted to do it on the up and up. So about 6 weeks into that stealth mode, we come to John and Scott Lurding and Rob Pinta and like the leadership of Venture First. We say, hey, so we've been cooking on this idea. Like, what do you think about this idea? And like, we kind of want to move towards this and leave and do this idea. And to their credit, they were not at all territorial, like, great, thanks for the new product line. They were like, we support you. Like, we were some of their best two guys. They're like, we support you in spinning out and doing this because that's what great entrepreneurial ecosystems are all
Nice.
about. Is like they spin great companies out of other great companies. And they were like, like, we'll take a single digit equity slice, to basically like let you guys over the course of 2019, over 12 months, phase shift up our time on Forecastr, like basically start meaning more and more time. While they covered our full salary the whole way through. And then at the end of 2019, I was full-time forecaster raising a pre-seed for Forecastr while they were covering my salary, and then we get
Wow.
the pre-seed done. And January 1st of 2020, we switch over from one payroll to the other, 750K in the bank. We're ready to rock, 18 months worth of runway, and we come straight out the gate. And it was like this perfect way to like low risk, never went without a paycheck, never paid myself less than 70K, to just like shift over and hit it. In a way that like FantasyHub was a nightmare. I paid myself $12,000 a year for 2 years. We never had more than 6 months of runway in 3 years, and it was just but it's the learnings of a second time entrepreneur that you say, okay, I think we can let's be smarter about how we kind of set this thing up so you increase your probability of success.
So good. Like, I just had this picture of you basically ch jumping off the cliff, but you have the paraglider and you're just sort of like, "Yep, all good." And you're just sort of like, instead of the falling down and like bumping off the sides of the, you know what I mean? Like, and all the things that
Totally.
you're just sort of like, "All right." And like that's how you started, which is
Man, that
amazing.
is so it's I think about it, yeah, like in so similar ways that like sometimes I felt like with fantasy, if it was just like bouncing around like a Plinko board. You're just like, "Boop, boop, 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 boop." And it's like forecaster, not that it's been all just like up and to the right, but it's been so much cleaner. Like for example, we have only one time in the company's 6-year history had less than 3 months worth of runway versus fantasy of never more than 6 months, right? It's like we've always been in a good financial
Yep.
position because of the proactivity, because of the intentionality, the business model, the strategy, getting the people right, all the things that we've done this time around that I learned the hard way at FantasyHub and then we could do on initial at Forecastr. has just led to a better business. And you know, and obviously many things lead into that, but that's just one of those things. And so I think it's like, I'll put it to you this way. I think if I ran a venture fund, I would probably exclusively invest in second time or more founders. Like, I don't think I would invest in a first time founder. No offense to any first time founder. And some of them hit it and crush it. But it's just so hard to hit it and crush it on that first time around. I think I would filter out that and just say reduce that risk profile and say I'm only going to invest in people that are second or third time around, because it's just so much easier to hit it when you have your variance.
Well, and you're also getting people who probably had a fantasy fall down version, and then it's like, okay, like this is how I approach the world differently now, which
Yes.
then you don't have to filter out, which is, yeah, no, so true. What so okay, so you jumped off, you're gliding now, after transitioning out from the company. What was the first, like, first month, first 6 months like?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So first month was we went into Techstars, so actually it was really cool that, like, so one of the intentionalities around this company was when we are bringing forecast to market, one of my core philosophies that you could say, or core beliefs, is that, like, distribution wins the game. That, like, product's really important. Like, people are frankly at the top. People make the magic happen. Distribution wins the game. Product's super important. But it's like I really prioritize distribution. And so, having gone through Techstars, I knew that financial modeling was a piece of the curriculum. I thought that if we could get Forecastr into Techstars, it's the biggest and most influential entrepreneurial network in the world. It would be a really great asset for the company from a distribution perspective. And so in 2019, I uh, I applied to Techstars Anywhere. At the time, it was the virtual accelerator, because it's before COVID and everything. And I knew the managing director from my earlier time at Techstars, and he took a chance on us. We had no product, no revenue, no customers, just an idea. Me, Logan, and our technical co-founders, and they accepted us. And so, like, literally, we started the company on January 1st, and on, like, January 16th or whatever it was, Techstars started. And so we were like a brand new, don't have anything, no metrics to
Fresh.
report on. Like, weekly metrics were like not a thing. We were just building. And so we just went straight into Techstars. And so that first 3 months was this awesome, just like, going through mentor madness and getting all these ideas on how to point the company, which was really fast tracked our iterative thinking on strategy, and then, like, getting to that midpoint of the year when, like, we were supposed to have a product in market by the middle of 2020 so that we could sell it the back half of 2020 and then raise the first half of 2021, because that's our 18 months runway through Q2 of 2021. And of course, we didn't get the product out in June of 2020. We didn't end up launching it until December of 2020. But Logan and I made a very smart move, which is to say, well, okay, we don't have a product. We were literally in June, we were like, shit, we don't have a product, and we're probably not gonna for a while. Like, Jonathan's saying, it's just taking longer, and, like, we get it. Okay,
Yeah.
but this is a tough product, but it's like, what are we gonna do? And we started to think, we were like, well, like, we've been selling Google Sheets financial models for years. Why don't we just pre-sell annual subscriptions and build models in Google Sheets and say it's a pre-sold annual subscription. When Forecaster launch, we'll migrate it, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. And we started selling those like hotcakes. Like, so Logan and I are just slinging Google Sheets models. We're building Google Sheets models. We're all calling them pre-sold annual subscriptions, or we're building, like, recurring revenue on it, even if we're just selling Google Sheets models. And in Q3 we sold 100, like 50 or 60, and then in Q4 we sold another bit. So we had 100 customers by the end of the year, just all on Google Sheets. And then you'll love this, because, like, so the product's launching. We're gonna have to go immediately into fundraising. Like, it's like, I gotta start this raise in January 2021 because we got 6 months of runway. It takes a while to fundraise. I gotta do it. And I don't want to do
Yep.
that with a bunch of Google Sheets models. I have to get them into the product. I have to be able to say, I've got 100K of revenue in the product, not in Google Sheets. And so we launched the product like the third week of December. We had two analysts that we had hired on at this point, Alex and Kelvin, who are still at the company, directors now. Those are total killers. They've been here for 5 years, amazing hires. It was like me, Logan, Alex, and Kelvin had 100 Google Sheets models. And I kid you not, the week between Christmas and New Year's, we called it Hell Week. And the four of us hunkered down in a room and hand transferred 100 individual financial models into the software that week in between Christmas and New Year's. And it's still just like a running joke at the company, that Hell Week. But we just hard shifted them all up into the product, launched them all. And then I go right into the seed round in 2021, and we just smashed it out of the park. It was like,
My gosh, that cut to the hacker apartment photo of two people laying on a mattress, like just wiped out, like trying to catch 10 minutes of Z's. Like,
Oh, it was
oh my
outrageous.
gosh.
And those guys they started in November. Like we hired them in November, and like a month later, we're like, okay, guys, I'm sorry, but like we gotta all like I know it's Christmas, but it wasn't that we didn't like work on Christmas, but it was like that like 5 or 6 days in between. Oh,
Yeah.
it's such a fun memory, honestly. Look, like it was literally hell at the time. We were all like stressed out. But looking back
Yeah.
on it now, it's one of those time things. It's just like funny, but yeah, yeah.
That was
So
crazy. So
yeah.
you went into the next year sort of prep then.
Yeah, so we like it's like boom, we had just shipped it up 100K into the software. Not a lot of user engagement metrics or anything like that because it was like brand new in the software. But I went in straight in to a seed round there, and honestly, we hit it great. Like, I mean, I would say one of my biggest strengths is kind of the masterminding of the fundraising process. I'm very intentional about building the pipeline. I'm very intentional about crafting the narrative. I'm very intentional about approach, blitzing the market, scheduling well in advance to concentrate investor meetings in a very short time period to kind of like cheat my way towards momentum, right? Because like broken clocks, right, twice a day type of deal. You got 40 pitches in a week, you're going to get a yes. And that's what happened. Like I had 40 pitches a week for the first 4 weeks of January. By the end of the first week, I had 750K committed. By the end of the second week, I had 1.25. Third week, I get a lead check of $1 million from Resolute Ventures. And by week 6, we were well oversubscribed on the round. And it was the cleanest hit of fundraising. And of course, it was a great time too, right? That first quarter of 2021, it was just like nice and frothy in the market. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? So just
totally.
like
Yep.
brand new software, AI hadn't hit yet, nice and frothy off COVID. Just hit a quick seed round and get it done. And that one really like propelled the company really to that first good go. Like that pre-seed capital is just hey, let's stand up at enough proof to where we can get a nice batch of capital. That 2.5 million could then give us an 18 to 24 months to really take a rip at it, in the market. Um, and then and that kind of kicked off that next phase, you know.
Oh wow, that's so good. I'm getting all these mental pictures of like that raise process and being so concentrated, and then I'm imagining after you get oversubscribed, same thing, right? It's the you slept great the next
Totally.
day after.
And that was my
That's
first term
awesome.
sheet. It's like at FantasyHub, it was all angel capital, like I said, like that round was a special one for me. It was like the first time I ever got a VC term sheet in the email. Like I remember like me and my wife, it was COVID, so things were closed, but we ordered in Jeff Ruby's, which was like a really nice steakhouse, but it was like ordered to the house, you know what I mean? And I still remember like the takeout containers because they were like so nice. But we ate Jeff Ruby's that night and we were like, it was just like cloud nine. Such a great feeling, when you get that done and kind of unlock that next stage. And then such great energy, to go make it happen from there. And we were able to, with that 2.5 million, really just start to build on the momentum we had, like really lean into those like tech stars and other partners to drive business. The product was solid. Although later we would have to rebuild it. It was like one of those ones of like build it once, build it again, then build it right, and that's where we're from finally now with Forecastr. But it was an awesome, product to kind of take to market. And we were able to, with that 2.5 million, get up to 1 million in an annual recurring revenue, which kind of put us to the next phase, which was I'll say my first attempt at raising a Series A in 2023. Now, like I didn't actually I just raised my Series A 6 weeks ago, 7 million here in 2026, but my first attempt was actually in 2023 when we had a little bit north of 1 million in annual recurring revenue. And frankly, I honestly some like snappier growth metrics. But I went in to go raise that next phase the quarter that Silicon Valley Bank was like, oh, and failed.
Oh yeah.
And that was the absolute like worst time to try to be fundraising, especially for a startup selling to startups in the financial data ecosystem. It's like, hey, I'm a
Yeah.
financial
Yeah.
data startup selling to other startups, and the like center of the financial data startup ecosystem just imploded. You know,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
and it was such a nightmare. I was like halfway through that process trying to raise an $8 million Series A. I had some folks like pretty deep in the process, and then Silicon Valley Bank failed, and I had to. It was like one of those like call the war room together moments where after that, like, everybody was dropping like flies out of the round, and Logan and I had to kind of pull the council together to just say, hey, like, what are we going to do here? Because we only have another 4 months of runway. The Series A seems at significant risk. Like, I still have another half of my pipeline that I haven't pitched. Like, am I going to keep pitching this $8 million Series A, or should I downshift? And that was one of those really tricky judgment calls that I think, like, as a founder, the thing that more than anything will define your success or your failure is your ability to make really good judgment calls. And it's like there's a lot of grayscale decisions that come to your desk. There's no clear
Yep.
answer, and you just gotta look at it. You gotta ask for some opinions. You gotta stir them in a pot, and you gotta pick a line, and you gotta run like hell. And you do that right in a bunch of succeeding things, you're gonna win. You do it wrong, you're gonna lose. And that was one of those big moments.
Yep. Well, and I think being able to, and I imagine that this is where being outdoors and sort of nature also probably plays into your, your operating system, but being able to also get quiet and listen internally, get back to that sort of empty brain, because that's ultimately where, and you don't know where it comes from, but you just have this moment when you get quiet and listen and you go, yep, that's it. And you're not sort of, you're not closing your eyes and sort of doing eeny meeny. You're going like, this just came to me and it's from the culmination of everything that I've got
Yes.
internally.
That's right. I think that gut intuition it bubbles up in that way. And I think you have to kind of listen to those instincts, and you have to be able to discern between an impulse and an instinct.
Hmm.
And that's not always
Yep.
clear, and that's where the judgment comes in. But our judgment at that time was vote of no confidence on the A, downshift to a $4 million seed two. The second half of the pipeline that I set up meetings with, they were none the wiser about the A. And I went to them and said, hey, just launched a $4 million seed two. You're going to love,
Yeah, that's awesome.
and that like, and we were able to get that thing done, oversubscribed to 4.5. We closed that round in July 2023. And that got us on that next turn, of the hamster wheel, which was then a really critical time for the company, where it was at that time, kind of as we went to 2024, where we started to realize, hey, this go-to-market platform that we've built, it's not going to scale. There's some stuff we got wrong, product design wise early, that are going to be tough to rip apart. And we actually brought in a CTO, kind of take us from 1 to 10. He's like a guy, Eric Schreiner, who's our CTO of the company now. We ended up parting ways with our co-founding CTO, Jonathan, as he went to go start another company in the crypto space. And we brought in Eric. And one of Eric's big moves, like, guys, I think, like, we got to kill 1.0. We got to build Forecastr 2.0, right? And that was a big move. That was a hard move. That was like, hey, I'm telling you right now, Steven, it's going to take 12 months to get this thing to market. You're not going to know if this bet is right for like 12 to 18 months, but but you're going to have to bet the company on it, because, like,
Yep.
and it was needed. Like, our metrics and everything led us, like, it wasn't an easy decision because of that time horizon, but I knew it was right. And when we made that decision, it meant, okay, things aren't going to really start to get really good for us until we get that new software out. Things are still going to be like good. Like, we've always been very consistent and very, like, linear in our growth, but we've always needed to kind of go exponential. And I kind of knew at that time, hey, I'm gonna have to find a way to capitalize this company through that rebuild, and
Yep.
that was kind of the next big checkpoint that I had to get through as a founder. Was like, how am I going to capitalize this thing one more time, so that I can get 2.0 out into the market, so I can get some good early proof points of that, and then go raise our Series A like we just recently did. And that's where our seed three came in, as we raised a seed three that was largely internal. And it allowed us to kind of, shoot that gap. And I had a bit of a masterminding that I did, to get that seed three done as well. So that was kind of the next big phase for the company.
Oh my gosh. Well, now you got all the rounds under your belt. Like you've seen all the
I'm
different
making them up,
versions.
seed three.
Yeah. That's amazing. So what was so once you raised that and you sort of between, the 6 weeks ago and the A, between that moment and the A, how was that period?
Yeah, well, so that one was like, so when we raised the seed three was in, it's like kind of August of 2024. And we launched the new software in March of 2025. And so that was really the big moment here at Forecast, was, and when we put that new software up, is like, it's just 10 times better than the first. Like, the product design and philosophy around it's way better. It's like really Excel like at the core to flatten the learning curve and like max the intuitive usage of the product. But then integrations, analytics, reporting, and collaboration are much better structured around it to 10x the value. And I think that's what we've always had to do to win this market is like, make that mountain of a learning curve a molehill versus Excel, and then give them a really green pasture on the other side to make it worth it. And I think 2.0 really did that for us. And since we launched it in March, like the net revenue retention's way better, the unit economics are way better, like all those kind of core metrics, the engagement's way better. It's just a much, much, much better software. And it's unlocked a lot more product velocity. And so it was kind of this like raise the seed 3, late 24, just hold your breath until you get it out in March in 2025. March to the end of last year was just hit it as hard, as fast as you can to just drive that growth up to where then in September of last year, I went out to raise the Series A. And Logan, my co-founder, when I go raise, he takes care of the entire business. I completely, put up a giant wall between me and the business, more or less. If something's absolutely critical and I absolutely need to know, or he needs my opinion on something, he pierces that wall. But otherwise, I stay in my little bubble where our shit don't stink, frankly.
Mhm.
And it's just like,
Yeah.
and I can just live in that world where I'm just pitching investors on the vision and the story and the
Well, and
whatever.
you're freeing up brain space too, because if
Is
you get in any of the muck and mire of any of that stuff, it pulls you out of that
That's
like free
100%
space.
right. That's 100% right. And so I decided to do a roadshow this time around. We've always rated virtual, but I said Series A, it's serious. Let's do an 8-week roadshow. I went to Atlanta, Boulder, New York, Boston, Salt Lake, San Francisco, Austin. 7 or 8 cities in 8 weeks. From September through October. That was all my like initial pitches. And from those initial pitches, we ended up getting a term sheet from a fund out of Capital One in November. So that they ended up leading the round, and that started the syndication process. Which kind of bumped us up against the holidays. There was a race to try to get it done by the end of the year. We didn't get it fully syndicated by the end of the year, but we did by mid-January, and which kicked off like a 2-week close timeline. At Capital One has more kind of hoops they got to jump through, so close was then supposed to be in end of January. And mind you, like I knew since April of the prior year that we were going to run out of money in February. Like we are the best at
Yep.
forecasting. And like we're like, yep, we're like February is going to be when we're going to be out. So let's go out to market in September. We'll get it done by the end of the year. Couple months of buffer, no big deal. Of course, like I just said, we didn't. January starts to run on. Our close date's supposed to be January 29th, which is like 2 weeks before we run out of money. And it was really uncomfortable and tight. But like we're using our software, we're managing the cash as good as anybody. We're keeping it steady, and I'm feeling good about hitting that round in late Jan. And then of course, like, this round was a tricky one. We're like literally the day before close, one of the investors that's in for $1 million calls me and says, hey, basically like, and surprise, like I can only do 500. Like you got to find another 500. Sorry. And it's just like, so now I go from hitting my minimum to 500K below. I got to spend the next 2 weeks, replacing that 500K out of thin air. Me, Logan, and my dad ended up throwing a little bit of capital in to kick it over, right? And I closed literally the day before the last payroll exits my bank account. And it was like as tight can be. And so I
You
go
just
from
like
this, look,
slide right
look,
in.
and then it just hits. And I'm just like, I
Oh
just
yeah.
absolutely just
It's the bank
cloud
refresh. You
nine.
hit the refresh button on the bank, and then you go like,
Oh, 100%. So it is not for the faint of heart, this way of life. But it's like, but it's that thrill, that is the thrill. It's like it's just you're riding it, you're hitting it, you got to trust yourself. It's like, and I did like the whole, I'm not like I'm stressed, but I was also confident. I'm like, I'm gonna get this done. Like just hit it, just focus, just control what you can control, do what you got to do, and just hit the shot. And it's like, of course, when you're in the middle of that process, it's really scary. But then you hit that shot and you feel like a titan. You're like, "Wow," it's like it's that feeling of like I just accomplished the hardest thing I've ever accomplished. And so I'm kind of still in that afterglow right now of just being completely and totally stoked on what just happened.
"Yep, that's amazing, awesome." Well, what do you see from this point forward? Like, what do you see in I think we're in an era now where like doing the old where do you see it in 5 years is not really that seems like forever away. But like the next few quarters, like what are the things that you've got, your eye on?
Yeah, so the two big ones right now is what we call the integration supercharger and building the Iron Man suit. And the biggest flag that we're planting or where we're standing our ground is frankly on humanity. Most of the market in our space and financial forecasting is flocking to AI first, AI generated, AI everything. And we recognize the utility of AI, but we think AI is an Iron Man suit built around a human. We think AI in its best expression is a really powerful Iron Man suit built around Tony Stark that can help him do all these amazing things that he couldn't do without it. But if you take Tony out the middle, it's just a hunk of metal. And so our,
Right.
our philosophy is like build the Iron Man suit. Like, and that's why like Forecastr, yes, we have a SaaS platform that's super dope, but we also have analysts and CFOs on staff that sit on that provide expert financial support, strategic financial leadership for your company. Like we think finance should be run by an expert. And so like the big focus for us right now that we have the new software up and stable and out and rocking and all the Claude code and stuff that supercharge our engineers into ways that nobody had thought was possible 5 years ago. It's incredible the pace that they can build. It's about just integrating it with all your data so that Forecastr is not just your financial model. It is your goal setting and performance tracking engine. Like it's where you set your goals. It's where you track all the performance of your business. It's where you understand the metrics of your business, and so like connecting your CRM and your payroll and all that kind of, and your Stripe, so working on those integrations and then building that Iron Man suit to turn our analysts into superheroes, basically, and just like
Yeah.
allow them to just like, do deliver more impact for more customers than they ever could before. And so I think those are like the big two focal points of the company right now is drive those two strategic priorities into existence. Once that's there, then I tell everybody it's less thinking, more doing, it's execute with excellence. The game is won on the field of play. Like you must execute with excellence. No unforced errors, no mistakes occasionally, but learn from them. But it's like you gotta execute, and it's so it's not this kind of sit back and think, that it's a very doing focused time. And so that kind of back half of the year, that's what I'm trying to do is like anything big that's changing, that's new. I'm trying to get it done this quarter so that like back half of the year, it's just put your head down and crank and let's go hit,
Yeah.
6, 7 million in ARR. We do that. We are off to the races. Like, you know what I mean? We're off to the races. So that's the focus.
That's amazing. I love it. So, okay, so for the wrap up piece, what's if you had to look back in your entrepreneurial journey up to this point and give yourself a piece of advice, the younger version of you pre fantasy maybe, what's one thing that you sort of still end up leaning on or focusing on? Like, what's one of the things that you would pass on?
Biggest thing, it's not even close for me, is what I call people make the magic happen. That's my phrasing for it. That's what I tell myself. And that what that means is just that like it's all about the people. So just like put the people first. Meaning like, just like that old ad is like it's not what you know, it's who you know. It's like it's so true. But like you gotta get out there and like be meeting people, be evangelizing, be thinking about people. Like if you're doing a partnership, that's a people game. You better build that relationship before you get into the transactional element to it. When you're dealing with a customer relationship, roll out the red carpet, win them over at the people person level before you drive the business outcome. When it's an investor, you better get to know that person super well because it's like a marriage, right? It's like, and it's just like recognizing like at every turn, it's the people, it's the personal relationship. It's that kind of human relationship piece that like affords you the most leverage. But early in my career, I was like, I'm too busy to go to that event. I'm too busy to get coffee with that guy. There's no transactional benefit out of it. It's like, dude, that's
Yeah.
all wrong. Like
Yeah.
now I'm getting coffee with all sorts of people. I'm meeting people. I'm doing whatever because like it just comes back in serendipitous ways. That guy 3 years later sends me an email and connects me with someone who's just like, great. It's like, you never know. And so it's just play that people game well. You do that and many, many other problems take care of themselves. You don't do that, and you can have the best other stuff in the world, I think it's just hard. So I think that really putting the people first. That's the big one I would have told myself early on.
Nice. I love it. Well, thank you so much for the time and for the stories. I love hearing like, I just love mentally taking this journey through all the different, ups and downs, and um the whole journey. It's almost like we just sort of did the AT version of Forecastr, right? It's just all those little, like,
Yeah, the
with
peaks and
bears and
valleys
mountain
along the
lions and
way,
all.
and
Like,
totally.
yeah,
Dude, totally.
exactly.
And this is so fun, man.
Um,
I really appreciate you having me, Kyle. And like, it's
yeah,
awesome, man. And so it's just great to be here with you. I appreciate you. And
yeah, amazing.